Not yet, but they're slow. It's always a slow process. And then finally, wrapping up, kind of just about to come full circle here to where Michael left off, using SVGs and vector images in our technical documentation. Again, this is kind of like what you run into with commercial printing. If you're going to spit everything out in raster and bitmaps and you're going to give it to somebody who's working on a product manual in Adobe or MS Publisher, it might work, but the more of those raster images you give that person, and the more pages that document gets, it starts slowing down a lot. If you are working in that environment and you have the option to use vector images like EPS or SVG, it can really make life a lot easier for whoever's doing that technical writing. It makes, you don't have to, if they decide they want a thumbnail view of something, or you gave them a thumbnail view of something and they want a bigger one, you don't have to go back and re-output something at a different resolution. They can use that same one and just drag it to a different size. And that's now coming into our mobile web pages that we've been working on, and see some of that here. If you have a mobile device with you and you've got a second to try to open up one of these, I'd really encourage you to go ahead and try FSIFab.com Beaters HTML or Draper HTML. Pull it up on the browser on your device, see what happens, pinch and zoom the illustration, touch it around, rotate your screen. Anybody, is it coming up, or I hope? Beaters. This was actually a close call. We were testing this, 2 nights ago? Yeah. I mean, it worked 3 days ago, and 2 nights ago we were testing it. Like, hey, I can't get to that page. And I can't get to that page either. And then I checked the whole site, and it's like, oh, the whole site's down. Yeah, so, but found out our GoDaddy credit card expired and just had to punch in the new date. And so we're back up and live now.
It works on a Windows phone.
Yeah. Funny how that works, huh? It's native browser. There's no plugins. It's just browser generated information. So I'd like to get ready to jump in here. I want to make sure, yeah, it looks like we've got time to do a quick walkthrough and then still have Q&A. Before I tell you what my favorite tools are, I just want to reiterate, just like Michael said, I am not a web guy. I am not a web developer. I'm not an ex-web page developer that then came into a SolidWorks environment. I'm a machinist who went to engineering, who then started using SolidWorks. My day-to-day life, I spend more time on a shop floor at a lathe or a mill than I do tweaking website stuff. But that being said, just saying, don't let it scare you away. I think we're going to try to make it really approachable here, what's going on. Favorite tools, of course, Composer Technical Illustration Workshop, Notepad++, again, for me, it's a great tool. Within Notepad++, I really recommend XML Tools as a plugin, and then within XML Tools is a really slick little trick called Pretty Print. If you remember when Michael did his search for 2.svg, it was a tree in this massive forest of stuff. I mean, it just about make your head crack trying to figure it all out. Well, Pretty Print's going to clean that up for us. A graphic software is really helpful. You can open up the SVGs in the browsers, yes, but if you open it up in a graphic software like CorelDRAW or Adobe Illustrator or Inkspace, which is free, those software packages will also tell you, as you touch different geometries, it'll give you information as far as, okay, within the SVG, that line or that fill is this number or that number, and you can really map out a plan if you've got a little, like I said, even Inkspace is free. And as far as testing them out, right now, currently, my favorite is using Chrome browser to do that. Partly because it's got some neat little inspection tools and view source, but mostly because when you're in inspection tools in Chrome browser, it has a simulation tool that you can see your website on different size devices, a Nexus, a note, a Kindle Fire, things like that, and it's pretty slick. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is went ahead and made a clip ahead of time of going through a workflow, and I'm just going to turn that clip on and just kind of walk through a workflow, and the clip starts a little bit before where Michael left off, so I'm going to kind of push it forward just a bit and then let it go here. Yeah.
Is there a way to rotate the SVG?
Okay, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Is there a way to rotate the SVG?
Okay, the question was, is there a way to rotate the SVG? Absolutely. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg.
You mean on that website? How do you do it?
Oh, on the website? No, not right now, not on that page. That's just a test page, but there are some, the browsers can execute certain instructions there that will rotate, scale, transform, and do all sorts of tweaking to that SVG. And then you can give the viewers control of that tweaking, or you can set it up to be triggered by certain things like mouse events, mouse overs and mouse clicks and things like that. And actually that's kind of what perfect. All right, so, okay, so where we're at here is just validating some SVGs by opening them up in a browser. Just finished doing technical illustration workshop in Composer. This was one that we happened to have done a BOM with. When you use a BOM, it'll automatically make hotspots, is what I'm kind of passing the mouse over there. And that caption's a little bit late. So I'm going to open up in Notepad that same SVG that we were just testing in the Chrome browser. A few elements to kind of be aware of. It has a header and things like that, just like a regular HTML website. You might recognize some of the syntax. You can have JavaScript, even if you don't know exactly what JavaScript is. You can have JavaScript in there. You can have links like href behavior. Now this is that big giant forest jungle that we were just looking at here. That you can do a search and replace in there. That big jungle is what we're going to call our path, and that's really what the SVG is broken down into a logical organization of components. There's some header information, there's some style information at the top, and then towards the bottom, when Composer outputs these, where everything really sits is in these paths. And within paths, you've got the other items called groups. And here, I think I couldn't see that if I did it say that it turned pretty print on or the XML tools. Okay, so it blew that giant jungle into a readable set of groups. Now what's not shown there right now, and you can have on your right hand side of Notepad, you can turn on something called Function Viewer, and it'll give you a breakdown of all those elements, actors, and those are the basic elements that Composer spits out into an SVG. You're going to have actors, hotspots, and then a few unnamed paths. And so far, it looks like everything I've seen so far, actor 0.0, actor 0.0 is just about the first one, and that's your shadows if you're going to have shadows. And all of these actors are tweakable. They're all editable. You can get in there and change styling, which is Composer right now spits out the styling, and that would be like the thickness or color of lines and things like that, or the color of a fill or color of a shadow. pretty much at the level of the actor. But what I'm doing here is you can also give an SVG some instructions about styling at the very top. So without going in and damaging or tweaking the actual, the actors and hotspots and stuff, you can leave some instructions at the very top that, give it, when you get to something called hotspot, or if you get to something called actor.3 or actor.4, you can use these different types of selectors to drill down and give certain components certain behaviors. And then again, just get in there, break it apart, tweak it, play with it, save it. I mean, you're not going to break your computer here. It's just an SVG file. Open it up in a browser, check it out again. One of the simplest modifications is to change the color of the hotspots. We changed it from green to red, but you can do just about every new CSS styling method that is part of the new HTML5 standards you have at your disposal for SVGs too. You can animate things, you can give them transitions, as you animate things, you can give it a slow fade in and a fade out. You can tweak line thicknesses. Now, like I said, as you look at these individually, they might not, one at a time, they might not really seem all that great, but you got to remember that the power here is you can combine them all day long, and then, so it just really opens up the imagination. And then just remember too, all these changes, if I'm in a big organization and maybe they initially only have one seat of Composer, I'm not doing these changes with Composer. You can take all this stuff, do the tweaks. If you've got somebody who's handling your website work, they can do it. Another thing that a lot of people probably don't realize is the text in the bill of material. Even though this is an image we're looking at, the text is not locked out raster. You can change the bill of material entries in those rows of that table by going into the SVG and changing something. So, if any of you hold off and drag your feet on creating illustrations and images because, ERP hasn't given you part numbers yet, don't worry about it. Make them. And then you can go back in and you can actually, modify or tweak those part numbers without, like I said, not even having to come back to Composer. I've done this with external. So CSS is your styling instructions, and you get three choices for CSS. You get inline, internal, and external. Inline seems to be the default output from Composer, and that's when I said, as we look down at all those actors, each actor throughout the body of text may get its own style instruction. But you can do also internal, which is like creating a paragraph at the very top of your SVG, like a little introduction with all the instructions for the entire page. Or you can give a little instruction at the top of the page that says, okay, for everything from this point on, there's a different file in the same folder or something. This is our external style sheet, and it may have a lot more stuff. And it is, if you're going to do a lot of styling, an external style sheet is handy to have because, if you're playing with wildly different styles, maybe you have half a dozen different style sheets, and you can leave that one pointer in the SVG pointing to style sheet 1, and then go back and tweak something in 1A or 1B or 1C and save it as style sheet 1, and all of the style instructions you have in that external sheet that you just played with now are going to be read when you open that SVG next time. So again, just recapping some of the basics changes, color, fades, moving, scaling elements, modifying line weights, things like that. It's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that you can do, and I'm not even, I can't even imagine, what else combinations could be used. It's just, and like I said, I'm not using Composer. I'm not a web guy, and it didn't take very long to get in there, make a few tweaks, changes, and boom, it's there. It doesn't require ActiveX, no plugins, available on different devices. pinch and zoom, it rescales itself, so it's a matter of, at this point, what are the other applications? Oh, that's the last one. Okay. Let's see. Great, 10 minutes. I was really excited to get to a point where I could do some question and answer, and if there doesn't end up being many questions, I've left some other samples and demos and stuff I could pull up. But first, I'd like to, questions for either me or Michael? Yes?
Yeah, just the rotation of the mobile device. Can you do anything else once you take that image and rotate? Or is there something special you got to do to the composer on the out?
Okay.
In other words, I want to run it like eDrawings viewer for files. I guess that's my main question. I have an eDrawing that takes like 1.2 gigabytes
Yep.
to run, and it crashes my Android constantly.
Yep.
I'm hoping to go back and test this and be able to run the same assembly output as an SVG, in which case it's lighter than eDrawings, in which case I'm wanting to know how to hide actors, rotate them around, and do all kinds of.
So you're wanting it still to be kind of like a 3D interaction?
Yeah.
Okay.
The question is, right, can I have the SVG graphic behave more like a 3D e-drawings, a 3D PDF, so you can rotate, zoom in and out, very familiar to what we've all seen in e-drawings, right? And I think one of the things here of, you got to look at your application. What do you want that experience to be? Because if you want 3D, SVG may not be the best example, because it's a 2D vector image, what we're working with. Some cases, I don't know if you got into this, but some cases I've seen in terms of rotation. I mean, the other capability here, I mean, if you take a look at other car manufacturers' websites, if you're looking to buy a car, you can rotate the car around, you can change the color. That's kind of what we're getting into a little bit, right? But it's a different interface. It's lightweight, it doesn't require plugins, it's quick to load. But I would say we take the same approach with SVGs as we do with those type of examples, right? So you click a button, it loads another SVG that's rotated over. Click another button, it rotates.
Just incremental.
Out. So it doesn't do.
The SVG is a two-dimensional image.
You don't care if the user experience is an SVG as long as it's a lightweight 3D, correct? You want to be able to get something.
In my last composer class, I was outputting SVGs and we were able to rotate them in the Windows browser. So you're talking about being able to view these SVGs on mobile, so all I need is a middle mouse click in the mobile device.
Was it an SVG or was it a different composer
That was the
output?
ActiveX. That was the ActiveX plugin.
Right, the ActiveX, right.
Yeah.
You can have that, and then you can have the 3D bit, and you can hyperlink that to the SVG file that starts your SVG experience. The cool thing, and I don't know if you have an example of this, is on every SVG output, you can have like a home button that just goes back to the 3D experience of that button. So you can pop it back to the 3D interaction, but then go back to an SVG. So
ActiveX plugin
is what's pausing on most mobile devices, ActiveX.
No, it's Internet Explorer.
Well, and if I can, I think I actually have a little demo that's all done in SVG that might, and you can tell me, might get close to what you're talking about there.
Yeah, because I think that's when you're talking about getting an output from Composer that is 3D, and you can rotate it on the web. That's using the Composer player. So in terms of how that's utilized, it's very similar to eDrawings, ActiveX as a plugin. as an additional program that has to run to give you that experience.
All right, maybe I can borrow that mic. Is that working? Yep. Okay, you can hear me? All right, so what I've got here is a real example of something we just did. I've got a, being a small company, maybe other people have this problem, but I hate it when people sell my prototypes. It drives me up the wall. Anyway, so I've got a prototype of a controller there, my first and only of that one, and it sold with the truck. So I didn't have much time to get all the information on it. But what we had is, since we've got it in SolidWorks and Composer, I've got, just like what we saw on the mobile devices there, we've got our, SVG, again, it's two-dimensional SVG, it's interactive and things like that. And just like Dave was mentioning there, if we want, we can make any interaction here click outside of this and then onto, say, for instance, a video that's been done. And again, it's just a regular MP4. It doesn't require an ActiveX. Now the user doesn't get control of what's going on besides a pause button. And it was a little bit fast here, so I hope nobody gets sick on this roller coaster ride of my wire harness. But you can at least, if you can't rotate and spin things and have control that way, and if you don't want to have like an array of a different angle every 5 degrees to kind of fake the rotation, maybe you can click onto a video that gives a different effect like that.
So this is linked to an API then, essentially?
It's a video, but it's a .mp4, same type of format that YouTube uses all day long.
Right. So it's raster again.
This part of Composer was done with the high resolution image, the output. So this is a series of raster images that's strung together in Windows Movie Maker with, whatever 1 divided by 30, so you can get 30 frames per second transition, and then saved as an animation. The same part from Composer, different workshop, technical illustration workshop, spits out this. So same Composer file, using 2 different workshops, 2 different outputs, and in the end, linking them together. So, again, the biggest question is, as engineers, our job is to communicate. And the job's not done until the information is been communicated well. So who are the people, who's our audience receiving that information? And, in my case, in our situation, we have people that need it fast, and they need it on really limited bandwidth situation. And like Michael said, there's other situations on a shop floor. You can have an e-drawing viewer, you can have an ActiveX, and go ahead and give them that control. It really depends who's your audience, who is this going to? And, and Earl had a class just a little while ago talking about keeping different files, different types of setups depending on who is this going to. If I'm going to print to commercial printing, I'm going to open up a certain type of approach, and if I'm going to go to web, I'm going to have a different type of approach. More questions?
You had that YouTube video you were going to run through that was showing your the sales pitch you were doing for the Boise.
Oh yeah. Yeah, again, this is nothing special. It was actually, I don't do a lot of animation in Composer, but, walking through the camera views, it really didn't take long at all. I didn't need something that had, a lot of opacity control and texture and all sorts of other bells and whistles. What I needed something was now, or, yesterday. And it was exactly, again, based on the audience I was working with, it was exactly what they needed, and they got it when they needed it. And, it's just to be able to put that Google Earth image there as the floor of the whole thing, and, it just gave a great context for what we were trying to communicate.
So how much time did you spend, would you guess, to get up to speed on this, to where you were outputting, I'm not saying this project, but getting comfortable with Composer, messing around with the SVGs, getting used to what you're doing to the point where you're comfortable to output, was confident enough to deliver it to customers?
On any given day, like I said, my main job is I run a shop, so spend most of my day on the shop floor. I'd say I'd probably spend 50% of my day, any given day, might be in SolidWorks, and way less than 5% of my time is spent playing with Composer. In fact, I'm standing here, my biggest concern being asked to speak is like, well, I don't know Composer all that well. I mean, I'm using it, and I love having it handy, but, I haven't really dug into tons of stuff. It really hasn't been, I've taken quite a few classes for SolidWorks. I've taken one class for Composer, and then I think after you came out and did the class, we got so busy I didn't even get to touch it again for almost a year. And then later that year, so, using it just at 5–10% of my time over a 1-year period is where I was when I made this video.
Very good. Well, thank you everyone for coming. If you have any additional questions, feel free to come up. We'll talk with you. But hopefully this helps understand, again, just how to create these vector images. And it's time to end the presentation. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for coming.